Lie-Nielsen Toolworks reintroduced the world to the large format block plane. The low angle or bevel up jack, joiner, and smoothing planes. These planes are unusual in that they have the overall function of a bench plane, but the operational functions of a block plane. The original Stanleys were never in very large supply. In 1989, we released a much improved version of the number 62 low-angle jack plane, which has become one of our most popular planes. That was quickly followed by the number 164 low-angle smoothing plane, and then in 2002 we created a never-before-made plane, the number 7.5 low-angle jointer. Like all bench planes, the large format block planes have a handle, a knob, a cap iron, and a blade. But here's where the differences come in. The depth adjuster is a knurled knob turning in a slot in the bottom of the blade. That's on both the number 62 and the number 7.5. The mouth opening is controlled by loosening the front knob and turning this lever, which moves a plate milled into the mouth, the front toe of the plane. Position the mouth wherever you need it for the appropriate cut. Tighten back down the knob, and it's ready to use. The depth adjuster is the same on the 7.5, but the mouth adjustment is different. There's a much smaller plate milled right in front of the blade, and that's adjusted by loosening these two screws at the front of the mouth on the top of the plane, and then sliding the plate again to the appropriate position for the depth of cut you're going to be taking. Tighten those screws back down so that the plate is reset flush to the sole of the plane. The 164 has the same mouth controls as the number 62, loosening the front knob and moving that plate. The depth adjustment is a Bailey style adjuster rather than the knurled knob at the back of the blade. If you loosen and remove this cap, you'll find a slot in a plate mounted on the blade. This plate is similar in function to a chip breaker. The slot provides purchase for the yoke that reaches through the cap and adjusts the blade by turning this knurled knob and cantilevering the yoke so you retract or advance the blade. It's very important that the distance from the slot to the tip of the blade is always the same. If it's different, you'll have different travel in the adjustment. You'll find most honing guides require you to remove this plate to sharpen the blade. But even if you're sharpening freehand, you'll periodically have to reposition the plate because every time you sharpen a blade, you shorten it slightly, therefore changing the distance between the tip of the blade and the slot. A simple way to be able to recreate this spacing is the first time you take the blade out of the tool, give yourself a mark on a scrap piece of material. Then, once you've put the plate back in place, you can find that mark and get the same distance. Another method to do this that I find a little more efficient is to use a stop block. A stop block is always going to be more consistent than working to a line. These other stops here help me with sharpening for different angles. Now with the blade back in the tool, we're ready to talk about setup. One of the advantages of the large format block planes is that the adjustments are very simple. It's important that the cap iron is not too tight. If it is, you're putting the tool under some stress, but also it becomes very difficult to make a depth adjustment. To find the proper tension for the cap screw, put it in place and it'll wiggle. Tighten down the thumb screw until it just stops moving, then go another half turn. Before making a depth adjustment, loosen the thumb screw a quarter turn. There is no lateral adjustment on the tool, so you're going to be making subtle adjustments with finger pressure on one side of the blade or the other. Bring the blade out until you can see it clearly. If it looks out of parallel, press on the side of the blade that's protruding more. Back the blade down in. When the blade begins to just disappear, you're very close to a cutting depth. Tighten the quarter turn back into the thumb screw, and then I use a small block of wood about 1/2 inch wide and about 3 or 4 inches long to take a test cut. I'm going to take a shaving from each side of the blade. It immediately shows you if you're cutting too heavy on one side or the other. This side's cutting a little light, so I'm going to use a small lightweight hammer. This is a 4-ounce cross peen hammer. And I'll tap on the side of the blade that's cutting heavy. Another test cut shows that I'm cutting evenly. I also know how heavy the shaving is going to be. If that's an appropriate cutting depth, adjust the mouth opening so that that shaving will just clear through. Another test cut will show if that's possible. The last thing you want to do is take the backlash out. Backlash is the amount that the adjusting nut turns from retracting the blade to advancing the blade. You want it in the advancing position so that it's pressing down on the blade and keeps it from shifting back on you in use. There are some small differences with the 164. With the Bailey adjuster, you loosen the cap screw, same point where the blade will wiggle, bring it down till it just stops, and then tighten about a quarter turn. Before you make a depth adjustment, it's very important that you loosen that screw, because if not, the yoke plate mounted on the blade may shift rather than changing the depth of cut. Turning the spin wheel on top of the adjuster clockwise will advance the blade by cantilevering the yoke, and counterclockwise will retract the blade by cantilevering backwards. Bring the blade out till you can see it clearly, and then back it down in. If one corner of the blade is protruding more than the other, use finger pressure to even up the blade, and then continue to the point where the blade is just disappearing. Tighten the cap screw and take a test cut. Once I'm cutting the depth that I want, set the mouth opening and make sure to take the backlash out. The available options for blades and different styles of blades make these planes especially versatile.